Okay, hi, this is Phil Kaveny, and I'm here for another discussion of what I'm working on recently. Well, it's hard to believe that less than a half an hour ago, I was making a connection between my niece and two of my friends who have some questions about their dog. My niece is a veterinarian, and she specializes in companion animal acupuncture, and at one point she was one of the on-site vets for the Iditarod race in Alaska. That's that famous race which replicates the emergency run from, I think, one city in Alaska to another to carry vaccine to forestall an epidemic. But just as I was talking to Hannah, and Jennifer was on the phone, and my wife was doing something, I said, who knows, maybe there will be a trip to, and I got as far as Alaska, but I ended up with, the F word, because what had happened was as I picked up my coffee cup to make a grand gesture, the handle fell off, and my coffee went into my computer. There was a great deal of fumbling and stumbling and people grabbing things, and I was suggested that I leave the room, which I did, and my computer seems to be saved. Things seem to be working, and we're progressing and moving along. One of the things I want to talk about, and this is going to work from the personal to the ideological to the social science perspective. We've been doing these videos now, this is probably the 15th or 16th, and part of what I've been doing is pursuing improved health weight reduction plan. And I can say that I'm 6 pants sizes down, and I got to the point now where I have another pair, that another kind of level. Large people will have like their clothes will be grouped according to size, and there's always the ones on different sizes, and I have some smaller pants that I'm going to have to go into now. Well, you're probably going to wonder how what I'm saying now has to do with my next few sentences. But I stumbled again. This is called sort of like the research stumble, or research crab walk, or something like this. I got it from Dr. Joel Pache, an English professor who I work with. And there seems to be, at least in psychology, a replication crisis as far as things that we've considered to be basic research. What that means is, with a scientific study, the idea, as it goes from the Enlightenment, is if you do something, it should be generally true. And if someone finds out follows your protocol, they should get the same results. And as we continue to get similar results, the study has more weight, it has more impact, especially if it's a policy study. Now, I'm interested in something, a whole graduate area, which is called, I guess I'm going to call it the Kaveny paradox for now. And it has to do with a certain aspect of 12-step programs. And since I found this replication crisis, which seems to be all abuzz in the literature, it's affected my research agenda. And I want to say another thing that's really important. I have a friend named Austin. I'm not going to use his last name now. And he's a social psychologist professionally. And I have another friend named Brandon, who's a teacher and does a number of other things. He's written 5 novels. He's my blog master and my editor. And I mentioned to Brandon that I had come upon this work which talked about the replication crisis. And if we go back, this is what I'm talking about, that if one is doing scientific research, someone else should be able to duplicate it for the research to be valid, especially if policies are going to be determined on the basis of that research. I can think of one paradigm example, and this is a word I use from the time I was in my early 20s, maybe even late teens at UW-Madison, and we talked about the Kantian paradigm case. Well, about 30 some years ago, a very famous child psychiatrist, Bruno Bettelheim, was the state-of-the-art on autism. And he had written books like The Empty Fortress was probably the most significant one. But at that time, autism was treated as if it was a mother's problem. Mothers were blamed for it, and it was determined that the best treatment was to totally separate the mother and the child. And some people actually followed that on a policy level. And what it turned out, and I even got to write about this in an encyclopedia article, that almost the exact opposite of this was true, and a great deal of damage had been done by implementing Bettelheim's formulation of the refrigerator mother. I mean, it was just so obvious that nobody got it. And of course now, in the almost the third decade of the 21st century, it turns out that autism is a very complex neurological medical problem, open to a great deal of discussion. And the thing I think we can say for sure is that it isn't simply a problem of the mother. Okay, so if I was going to go into autism research and I was going to use Bettelheim as a way of studying, then that would be a big waste of time, because that particular research perspective is not reproducible, it's not valid, and it's not useful for policy analysis or construction. Well, what I'm interested in is in 12-step program, because of my life experience and other people's life experience. I call it the Kaveny paradox. And anyone who is in a 12-step program will say, and I have papers to this effect up on my blog, that willpower does not solve the problem of addiction. Nobody beats it with willpower. And so I was doing some work on that and saying that, but on the other hand, if one says that my life has become unmanageable and I am going to turn my will and my life into something other than myself, then we have, and I can say from my lived experience, the willpower to not engage in the addictive behavior. So by saying you don't having it, living as if you do, and working with others that have the same problem, somehow we get through it. Well, I was interested in willpower in this paper I wrote this summer, and I studied a guy named Baumeister, and he was giving a lot more weight to willpower than I thought, and I was thinking, well, perhaps willpower does work. And what happened was I stumbled into a whole paradigm of research which says that Baumeister, who is pretty much the authority on willpower, cannot replicate his own research. So if I'm looking at a field where I'm saying, well, what am I going to spend the rest of my life doing? I'm not going to be going into something in which is grounded in irreproducible research. And maybe my own heuristic life experiences, what I've done, what I can tell you that stuff that I never thought I can do, once I do it, with support from my friends and others with the same problem, I seem to be able to do it. Isn't that interesting? It's almost like saying that if I give up certain very small things, that I can do anything else I want. So I think this is a much more profitable way to go, and the idea of knowing this at a certain point in your career, even in my case late, very late indeed, will help me to make further choices and know that had I not stumbled into this Baumaster's research, at least to an extent not being reproducible, was something that didn't come up in any of the other literature. And as I say, I only stumbled on it because I was following some interesting things on YouTube. Things on YouTube which I now am a contributor of with my own video. And I suspect I will be working on this replication crisis on my own, because I sort of have the free time to get it, and say, well, what can we replicate? What do we know? And shouldn't research be something to help people rather than something that you do as a career step? And I guess I can say that because I have sort of a golden parachute of a retirement, and I have access to resources and certain people skills which I can demonstrate, which certainly even surprise me. Like, we're just throwing this together in an ad hoc way because the material was here. And I have another tentative hypothesis, and of all things, it has to do with dogs. And what has happened is, in the 21st century, we have fortified ourselves into what I call silos of the like-mindedness. They call it the confirmation bias when you take your introductory research. And we always like to hear people saying what we believe is right, what we believe is correct. And I have found some areas where people who I would totally disagree with, or would think I would disagree with, and I might actually find points of confluence, things we could agree on. There's some question people are saying now, well, a lot of Americans are suggesting that America do a less adventurous foreign policy. I spent the weekend watching German public television, and I can say that if I was talking to someone, a Trump supporter, God help it, I'd have to say that the United States spending a lot of money on NATO so that the new Germany can follow an old German imperialistic policy is not a good idea. That's right, Trump actually said something that was a good idea. Or that America guaranteeing French sovereignty could allow the French to build something like a Pentagon for $2 billion, which was pretty much just an engine to put money into French defense contractors' hands. So what we find ourselves doing, I think, is we may not like somebody personally, but even if we don't like them, it may turn out that on a policy level, you know, they make sense. And I don't know how to bring discussions back to a policy level, but I do have different skills that allow me to talk to people who have allowed by themselves, if they're put in a room alone with rubber mallets or something like that, it wouldn't be pretty. That's kind of like my wife's family. Well, I think we're getting pretty close to the end, and this is one of the most ad hoc things I've ever done, but we got a lot to do, and maybe we help this one little dog a little bit by connecting these people. And that's good for me, because I have had dogs too, but that's another story. So we'd like your support. We're going to do some more to do some fundraising. I have some connections to do that, because I'm getting to think this is really worthwhile. So thank you all, and good reading, and good luck.